One day, you wake up and realize you no longer want the life you have spent years trying to build. Most people think something is wrong. Jung believed it is one of the clearest signs that your best chapter is about to begin. Picture this. You have devoted years to searching, meditating, consuming every spiritual book you could find. You attended retreats, journaled past midnight, and committed to the kind of inner work that most people never even consider doing. And then one day, something shifts. You experience what can only be described as an awakening, a moment of pure, crystalline clarity where everything suddenly aligns, where the noise inside your mind falls completely silent, where you sense a deep connection to something far greater than yourself. You expect that moment to propel you forward. You expect it to fill you with fire, passion, and unstoppable energy. You tell yourself, "This is it. This is where my real life finally begins." But instead, something deeply strange unfolds. The fire goes out. Your ambitions feel hollow. The career you were carefully constructing, the relationships you were relentlessly pursuing, the milestones you were racing toward, they all suddenly look like someone else's dreams projected onto your life. You lie awake at night wondering why you cannot bring yourself to care about anything anymore. Why the things that once electrified you now feel like obligations you were never asked to agree to. And here is what makes it even more unsettling. You are not sad. You are not depressed in any recognizable sense. You are simply empty. If that resonates with something you are living right now, I need you to hear this with complete clarity. You are not broken. You are not failing. And you are absolutely not losing your mind. What you are experiencing is something that Carl Jung, one of the most consequential psychologists who ever lived, spent decades observing, documenting, and ultimately mapping a way through. He had a name for it. He had a framework for understanding it. And most critically, he had a path through it. Right now, at this very moment in your journey, drop 11 in the comments and write, "I am the architect of my own awakening," because that is exactly what you are. You did not arrive at this emptiness by accident. Something in you is being rebuilt at a level far deeper than your conscious mind can currently see. At Carl Jung Philosophy, we explore exactly these kinds of transformations, the moments where psychology, consciousness, and genuine human experience intersect. And today, we are walking that path together. By the time this video concludes, you will understand precisely why awakening does this to people, what is genuinely happening inside your psyche during this phase, and how to discover a form of motivation and purpose so deep and so authentically yours that nothing the outside world throws at you can destabilize it. Stay with me. What follows may be the most significant thing you encounter this year. Carl Jung devoted the early portion of his career to studying individuals who were, by every external standard, doing everything correctly. Ambitious, disciplined, goal-oriented, and visibly successful. But again and again, he encountered a pattern that profoundly disturbed him. People would invest their entire lives working toward a meaningful objective, finally achieve it, and then feel completely hollowed out inside. Not temporarily unfulfilled, not simply in need of a change of scenery. Genuinely empty, as though something essential had been quietly removed from them without their awareness or permission. Jung described this as more than a midlife crisis, though he did use that language. He believed it pointed toward something far more fundamental, a deep collision between the life a person constructs for external consumption and the life their inner self is actually aching to inhabit. And what he observed in individuals who had passed through genuine spiritual experiences was even more striking. The very practices designed to deliver peace and clarity were also, in many documented cases, the precise force that extinguished their drive entirely. Jung termed this the awakening paradox, the moment when clarity becomes confusion, when the very achievement you labored toward becomes the thing that leaves you feeling most vacant. Here is why it happens with such consistency. Most of us spend the first chapter of our lives constructing what Jung called the persona. This is the mask we wear, the carefully curated version of ourselves we present to the world in exchange for approval, security, belonging, and status. Our professional ambitions, our relationship goals, our hunger for recognition, our terror of failure, all of it resides within the persona. And the persona is not malicious. It is not a lie in any deliberate sense. It is genuinely necessary for navigating the social world we inhabit. The problem surfaces when we begin to mistake the mask for the actual face beneath it. For years, sometimes decades, that persona functions as the engine driving your existence. It instructs you what to desire, what to pursue, and what qualifies as achievement. It tells you that you need to earn a certain income, attain a certain title, or locate the right partner before you can feel that you have genuinely arrived. And then awakening occurs, and in a single, disorienting instant, you see through the entire construction. You recognize that your professional ambitions were anchored in the fear of never being adequate. You recognize that your relationship pursuits were really an attempt to feel worthy of existing. You see that the entire apparatus of your drive was operating on the fuel of unconscious anxiety about your own value. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Jung described this phase using a concept he borrowed from medieval alchemy. He called it the nigredo, a Latin word meaning blackening. In alchemical tradition, the nigredo was the initial stage of transformation. It was the phase in which raw material had to be completely dismantled before it could be refined and reconstructed into something entirely new. Jung adopted this as a metaphor for psychological transformation. Before something authentic can emerge in you, the inauthentic must first dissolve. And that dissolution is precisely as uncomfortable as it sounds. The difficulty is that most people have no map for this territory. Most spiritual traditions promise that enlightenment leads to bliss and liberation, and they are not incorrect. But they frequently omit the section where you must pass through a valley of complete purposelessness to reach it. So when it arrives, people panic. They assume they have made a serious error somewhere. They attempt to return to their old ambitions and discover that the appetite simply is not there anymore. They try to manufacture new ambitions and find that nothing holds. They begin to wonder whether something is medically wrong with them. Jung witnessed this pattern repeatedly, and his response was always the same. Do not flee from the emptiness. You are not stalled. You are in the chrysalis. Now, I want you to pause here for a moment. If you have been sitting in this kind of emptiness, not knowing what you want, not recognizing yourself in the goals you once held so tightly, leave 444 in the comments and write, I trust the process completely. Because trusting the process is not passive. It is one of the most courageous acts a human being can perform during a season like this. It means choosing to remain present inside uncertainty rather than running from it. Let me walk you through a type of individual Jung encountered repeatedly throughout his career. He documented so many variations of this story that it became a kind of template for understanding what happens when spiritual awakening meets ambition. Imagine someone who has invested 15 years building a career they genuinely believed in. Late nights, real sacrifices, pushing through doubt and failure, and the persistent inner voice insisting it was not worth it. They produced results. By any external measure, they were successful. And then something breaks open. Perhaps it is a meditation retreat. Perhaps it is a close encounter with mortality. Perhaps it is simply an unremarkable Tuesday morning when the truth becomes impossible to continue ignoring. In that moment, they see clearly what had been driving them the entire time. Not passion, not purpose. Fear. Fear of being perceived as a failure. Fear of falling short of their parents' expectations. Fear of ending up like the people they had spent their entire lives trying to distance themselves from. Fear that if they ever stopped producing achievements, they would discover there was nothing underneath all that achievement worth preserving. Once they see that, the ambition collapses. Not because the work was without value, not because the path was wrong, but because the fuel that had been powering it was never authentic motivation. It was an escape mechanism, a way of outrunning an unbearable feeling about themselves. Jung called this purpose poisoning, and he maintained it was one of the most pervasive and least acknowledged sources of psychological suffering in modern life. We invest our entire existence pursuing what we believe we want, when what we are actually seeking is to feel secure, witnessed, and worthy. And when we finally perceive that, the pursuit stops making any sense at all. Here is where the real insight arrives. Jung was explicit that this is not a tragedy. It is a liberation, even when it refuses to feel like one. Because underneath all the fear-driven motivation, underneath all the persona-constructed goals and ambitions, there exists something else, something quieter, slower, and entirely different in its quality. Jung named it the self, capital S. Not the ego, not the persona, not the social identity you have been assembling since childhood. The deeper self, the authentic core, the part of you that existed before the world began instructing you who to become. And the self carries its own desires, but they do not feel like conventional motivation. They do not push or pressure. They do not carry that anxious, grinding, relentless quality of ego-driven ambition. They feel more like a pull, like a quiet current you can simply choose to step into. The person who spent 15 years building a fear-driven career eventually discovers they genuinely love guiding younger people. Not because it advances their personal brand, not because it strengthens their professional record, simply because something in them illuminates when they witness someone else grow. That is a soul-level desire. It requires no justification. It simply is. But here is the demanding truth. You cannot reach those soul-driven desires while ego-driven ones are still commanding the room. The noise drowns out the signal entirely. And this is the precise reason awakening must dismantle your old motivation before the new kind can emerge. It is not punishment. It is clearing. It is making space. Drop 333 in the comments right now and write, "I release what was never truly mine." Say it like you mean it, because those goals, those ambitions, those versions of success that no longer fit, they were not failures. They were chapters, and chapters are meant to end. The interval between losing your old motivation and discovering the new kind can feel like an eternity. Jung documented cases where this phase persisted for several months, and cases where it extended across several years. The duration depends substantially on a single variable: how consciously you navigate it. Most people respond to the void in one of two ways. They either force themselves back into familiar patterns, grinding through objectives they no longer believe in, attempting to will themselves back to their previous drive. Or they collapse into paralysis and abandon the concept of purpose entirely. Jung acknowledged that both responses are entirely understandable. He also maintained that both are mistaken. There is a third path. He called it conscious waiting, and it is precisely as demanding as it sounds. Conscious waiting does not mean inactivity. It means engaging in something very deliberate. It means developing the capacity to remain inside discomfort without immediately filling it. It means posing certain questions and then remaining still long enough to genuinely receive the answers. It means treating the emptiness not as a malfunction requiring immediate repair, but as a space that is already carrying something new, something not yet ready to be named. Jung developed 3 specific practices for navigating this phase. He applied these practices with his patients across decades, and the outcomes were remarkably consistent. The first practice he called sacred grieving. The concept is uncomplicated, even if the execution is anything but. Before you can move forward authentically, you must grant yourself permission to grieve what you are leaving behind. Your old ambitions, even those animated by fear and ego, provided you with something real. They offered structure, identity, and a sense of direction. They told you who you were each morning when you opened your eyes. Surrendering, that is, a genuine loss, and it deserves to be honored as one. Jung had his patients write letters to their former desires, letters that acknowledged what those desires had provided, what they had shielded them from, and why they no longer fit the person now doing the writing. He discovered that this practice, which sounds almost ceremonial in nature, actually accelerated psychological release. Because when you honor something consciously and deliberately, you are no longer compelled to hold on to it in the unconscious. Attempt it yourself. Identify one goal or ambition you have been carrying that no longer resonates as genuinely yours. Rather than simply allowing it to dissipate passively, write it a letter. Express gratitude for what it contributed. Acknowledge honestly what it was really attempting to accomplish on your behalf. And then release it clearly, with intention. The second practice Jung employed was what he called active imagination. This is not positive visualization. It is not manifestation in the contemporary sense of that word. It is something more precise and more revelatory than either. Active imagination is the deliberate practice of entering into genuine dialogue with the unconscious dimensions of yourself. You become still, you establish an intention, and then you listen. Not for logical conclusions or strategic solutions, but for images, impulses, feelings, and fragments of ideas that surface without any forcing on your part. Jung's guidance for this practice was elegantly simple. Sit quietly, pose one single question, then wait for whatever arrives. The question he consistently recommended was this: what wants to be born through me? Not what should I do with my existence? Not what will position me for maximum success? Not what will command the respect of others? Simply this: what wants to be born through me? And then you record whatever emerges, without evaluating it, without editing it, without interrogating whether it makes practical sense in the immediate term. Simply receive it and write it down. The outcomes Jung documented from this practice were frequently astonishing. A corporate attorney who kept encountering internal images of building furniture with her hands. A retired military officer who felt persistently drawn toward painting. A technology executive who uncovered a profound hunger to teach mathematics to children in underserved communities. None of these made immediate logical sense, but all of them, when approached with curiosity rather than judgment, led somewhere deeply true. If you have been quietly sensing something like this, a pull towards something that does not yet make rational sense, write 777 in the comments right now and add, I am divinely aligned with what wants to move through me. Because that signal you are receiving is not random. It is not wishful thinking. It is your deeper self beginning to speak in a language your ego has not yet learned to translate. The third practice was what Jung described as symbolic living. This one resists easy explanation, but it may be the most transformative of the three. Symbolic living means restructuring your daily existence around what genuinely calls to you, rather than what strategically positions you. It means pursuing fascination ahead of obligation. It means choosing resonance over reputation. It means attending carefully to what makes you feel more fully alive and treating that data as meaningful, trustworthy information about who you actually are at your core. This is not an irresponsible proposition. Jung was not advocating that you abandon your responsibilities and retreat from the world. He was proposing that you begin orienting your choices, even modest daily choices, by a different compass. One that points toward authentic expression rather than external validation. And what he consistently discovered was remarkable. Individuals who began practicing symbolic living, even in small, incremental ways, started to notice the first tremors of a new kind of motivation. Not the hot, urgent, pressured variety of their previous ego-driven ambition. Something steadier. Something that originated from within rather than from the fear of what might happen if they ever stopped performing. I want to spend some time describing what this new form of motivation actually feels like when it first arrives, because it is so unlike anything most of us have been taught to expect that a substantial number of people fail to recognize it entirely. Ego motivation has a very distinct texture. It is urgent. There is always an undercurrent of pressure beneath it, a persistent sense that you must reach somewhere or prove something before time expires. It inhabits your mind as a continuous hum of calculation and planning. It inhabits your body as tension, particularly concentrated in your chest and shoulders. And it is fundamentally conditional. It requires constant external reinforcement to sustain itself. If no one is observing, if no one is acknowledging your effort, if the indicators are not rising, ego motivation begins to falter. Soul motivation feels entirely different. It is calm. It is patient. There is no urgency embedded within it. It does not demand that you perform anything in this particular moment. It operates more like a magnetic pull than a push. You sense it in your body as warmth rather than tension. You experience it in your chest as a kind of spacious openness rather than a constricting knot of anxiety. And crucially, it does not require external acknowledgement to sustain itself. The activity itself becomes the source of energy, not what others think or say about it. Jung documented patients who discovered this quality of motivation, describing their experience in phrases like, "I do not feel as though I am working. I feel as though I am remembering something I always knew." Or, "When I am engaged in this, I am not attempting to accomplish anything. I am simply expressing what I am." That quality, expression rather than achievement, is one of the most reliable indicators that you have located something soul-driven rather than ego-driven. Another signal is sustainability. Ego motivation depletes you. Even when it is functioning effectively, even when you are producing visible results, there is an exhausting quality to it, because it is perpetually in service of managing an underlying anxiety. Soul motivation, by contrast, generates energy. You emerge from your work feeling more alive than when you began. That is not the ordinary experience for most people, but it becomes ordinary for those who navigate their way through the void with enough patience and awareness. Jung also observed that soul motivation does not operate according to a predictable schedule. It moves in waves and cycles. Periods of deep engagement are followed by periods of quiet internal gestation. Attempting to force soul motivation to conform to a rigid 9-to-5 structure, the way ego motivation can be imposed, is like instructing the ocean when to produce waves. The rhythm is its own. It does not answer to external timetables. This is why so many individuals who emerge from the far side of spiritual emptiness describe their lives as feeling less like something they are doing and more like something being lived through them. They still appear, they still do the work, they still exercise choice and make plans, but there is a quality of flow and rightness woven through everything that was entirely absent when they were operating on fear. And I want to say something directly to you now, because this is important. If you have been sitting in the void and quietly wondering whether you will ever feel like yourself again, whether the motivation, the clarity, the sense of direction will ever return, I want you to hear this. It will not return in the same form, and that is the point. What is coming is not a restored version of the self you used to be. What is coming is a truer version, one that does not require external conditions to be met before it can feel worthy, one that is not sustained by fear, one that does not collapse the moment the applause stops. Write 1111 in the comments right now and add, "I am ready to be born into who I really am." Post it as a declaration, because declaring it, even in a comment, even to strangers, is an act of the self beginning to recognize itself. Here is where I want to leave you. The emptiness you may be inhabiting right now is not the absence of meaning. It is the birthplace of it, the authentic version, the version that will not crumble under pressure because it was never constructed on anything fragile to begin with. Carl Jung devoted his entire professional life to studying the human psyche at its most intricate and most troubled. And the conclusion he returned to again and again across decades was this: the people who suffered most profoundly were not those who experienced the darkest circumstances. They were the ones who refused to permit those circumstances to teach them anything. The individuals who came through the void, who allowed the old self to dissolve without panicking, who practiced conscious waiting with enough steadiness to finally hear the quieter voice beneath all the noise. Those people reported something remarkable waiting on the other side. Not merely peace, purpose, not simply clarity, an unshakable alignment between who they genuinely were and how they were genuinely living. That is available to you, not in spite of what you are feeling right now, because of it. The chrysalis is not a place where nothing happens. It is where everything that matters begins. So here is what I am asking you to do, drawn directly from Jung's framework. Beginning today, spend 10 minutes each morning with a single question written at the top of a blank page. The question is this: What wants to be born through me? Do not attempt to answer it logically. Do not strategize around it. Simply ask it, and then write down whatever surfaces. No editing, no judging, no evaluating whether it makes immediate, practical sense. Do that consistently for 30 days. And pay close attention to what keeps returning. Jung held that the authentic life is not something you intellectually figure out. It is something you listen your way into. And that process of listening begins precisely where you are standing right now. In the void. In the quiet. In the space where the old self has released its grip, and the new one is still gathering the courage to arrive. Trust what is happening inside you. The chrysalis always appears as though nothing is occurring, but something is. Something extraordinary. Something that has your name on it. If this reached you today, if something in these words found the part of you that has been waiting for permission to stop performing and start becoming, leave one word in the comments below that captures where you are in this process right now. Just one word. It may reveal more to you than you expect. And if someone in your life is sitting inside that post-awakening silence right now, wondering what went wrong, send them this video. It might be the exact thing they need to hear today. This is Carl Jung philosophy. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.
Think about what that actually means in practice. Because symbolic living is one of those concepts that sounds beautiful in theory and then immediately feels vague the moment you try to apply it to a Monday morning. Jung was not speaking in abstractions. He was describing something concrete, something you can begin doing today in the life you already have without dismantling anything. Here is how he framed it. Every single day, you make dozens of small choices. What you read first thing in the morning, which conversation you linger in, and which one you cut short. What you allow yourself to pursue out of genuine interest versus what you push yourself toward out of obligation or appearance. Symbolic living begins the moment you start treating those small choices as meaningful data about who you actually are, rather than irrelevant background noise to be managed on autopilot. Jung noticed that most people live their days almost entirely in the second mode. They outsource their attention to whatever is loudest, most urgent, or most socially expected. And in doing so, they become strangers to their own interior life. Not because they are incapable of knowing themselves, but because they have never been taught to treat their own responses as worth paying attention to. One of his patients, a woman in her late 40s who had spent 2 decades in academic administration, described this shift with striking precision. She said that she had always noticed a particular feeling when she walked past a garden. Not excitement exactly, something quieter, a kind of settling, as though some restless part of her went still. She had noticed it for years and dismissed it every time as sentimentality, impractical, beside the point. Jung's intervention was simple. He asked her to stop dismissing it, not to quit her job, not to declare a new identity, simply to stop treating that quiet settling as irrelevant. To begin, instead, treating it as information. Within months, she had started tending a small plot of land on weekends. Within a year,
she was teaching others how to do the same in her community. She had not abandoned her career, but something in the texture of her daily existence had shifted completely. She described it as the difference between moving through her life and actually inhabiting it. That is symbolic living. It is not a dramatic reinvention. It is a reorientation, a decision to let what genuinely moves you have a seat at the table of your daily